Moscow's deputy foreign minister says the EU has lost over 1 trillion euros by not buying Russian natural gas. That's compounded by the simple fact that President Trump is now looking at putting secondary sanctions on India, and that's a bad idea. That and more on the daily Energy Newsbeat Daily Standup. Trump says U.S. to hike India's tariffs over Russian oil buys. This story from Bloomberg. President Donald Trump said that substantially raising the tariff on Indian exports over the New Delhi's purchase of Russia's oil, ramping up his threat to major trading partner. India, quote unquote, is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then much for the oil purchase, selling it on the open market for big profits, Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform on Monday. They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war. Because of this, I will be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the United States. Trump's post did not specify how much he would, but I want to go on record, President Trump, saying this is a mistake. The U.S. president's threat comes ahead of the August 8th deadline for Russia to reach a truce with Ukraine. The administration threatening so-called secondary sanctions on the countries that purchase Russian energy. The U.S. and other allies of Ukraine view those purchases as being to help prop up Russian Vladimir Putin's economy and undercutting pressure of Moscow to end the war. You're Miss President Trump. I dearly love you and think that you are the best president we've ever had. This is a mistake. And I want to go on record as saying so that there are a number of issues that your foreign policy group is not telling you on this. And I've been talking about this for about 6 months. In this particular case, here's the next story in our discussion today, and that is tankers deliver Russian crude to India despite U.S. and EU pressure. I want to give a shout out to Irina Slav, great energy writer. Sanctions don't work as intended. And that is one of the greatest quotes that is out there. In the ongoing geopolitical chess game surrounding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Western sanctions aimed at crippling Moscow's energy revenues continue to face significant hurdles. Despite intense pressure from the United States and European Union, tankers laden with Russian crude are still docking at Indian ports. This is critical. In this article, you have a statistic from Statista, and you can take a look at oil and gas, but you can also take a look and note that China quit buying coal from the U.S. and quit buying some other things during all of these trade kind of things. This is going to do more harm to the United States and what you've got going on, President Trump. Compounding the crude oil challenge is Europe's grappling with Russian diesel refined in third countries like India and Turkey. Prior to tighter measures, up to 40% of Europe's diesels were met by Indian refineries in processing discounted Russian crude. 2 or 3 weeks ago, we tracked a Russian tanker that went to India, and then diesel that was done in India went to California. President Trump, this is going to be a backfire. Looming secondary sanctions in India's response, they're going to tell us, the United States, to calmly stick it in our ear. And I'm being very polite when I'm saying that. Taking a look at Russia's gross domestic product, the GDP over the last 10 years, you can see that in 2022, they did have a little bit of a decline in 2023, and they've increased in 2024, and that looks like they're going to increase again. Russia has not been hurt by sanctions. The 18th round of sanctions by the EU have not stopped it. In fact, the EU is still buying Russian gas. The only thing that has been hurt is actually the consumers, as well as the deindustrialization between the net zero energy policies and not buying Russian pipeline gas, that has caused some serious problems. Let's go to this last story here. All three of these stories are interrelated. Moscow's deputy foreign minister says the EU has lost over 1 trillion euros by not buying Russian natural gas. In a recent statement, the Russian deputy foreign minister, Alexander, and I apologize, Gurushko, claimed that the European Union has lost an exceeding a 1 trillion, 1.16 trillion due to the termination of the cooperation of trade ties with Russia. This assertion comes on the ongoing geopolitical tension stemming from 2022 invasion of Ukraine. And what is not mentioned in all of the places out there is, why did President Putin invade? He invaded because they kept going on and they kept adding countries past the Gorbachev and Reagan agreements not to have any more on there. So this is not a surprise like the mainstream media. The President Trump, as you call the lying mainstream media and the fake news have been reporting that it was all President Putin's fault. Not necessarily true when you take a look at who were the original members of NATO. Go look that up and you'll be surprised who started NATO. That will be a big telltale sign there. There are 8 affected countries based on gas dependency and economic income on this. And you take a look at the GDP growth or decline that happened out of the deindustrialization during this, and it is a significant list in this article as well. There was a huge surge of bankruptcy amid the energy squeeze. High energy prices have been a key driver in business failures across Europe. Corporate insolvencies rose an average of 24% in 2023 compared to 2022, with a further 11 to 12% increase. And I had a hard time trying to figure out if they were just natural gas due to limited natural gas, or I could not tell whether or not they were just natural gas related, as in not being able to have natural gas, or if it was because of net zero energy policies. There is a fine line where it is showing up in there as well too. So President Trump, you're making a gigantic mistake by trying to force President Putin to the table. President Putin will go to the table if he sees business on the other side of the negotiations. But that's for a whole nother discussion. Let's go to the next story. BP has a huge win in Brazil in a significant boost for energy sector. BP has announced its largest oil and gas discovery in 25 years at the Bumerangue prospect in Brazil's deepwater Santos Basin. This underscores Brazil's growing importance as hydrocarbons and powerhouse, positions BP to strengthen its upstream portfolio amid its energy dynamics. Now, I'll tell you, this is actually very huge, and this almost coincides with Chevron's importance, their drilling going on with Venezuela just right around the corner. This marks BP's 10th discovery of 2025 following its finds like Trinidad, Egypt, and the Gulf of America. It stands out as potentially the company's biggest since the Shadez gas field in the Caspian Sea in 1999. Implications for this is huge because Brazil averaged 3.2 million barrels per day, with exports between 1.5 and 2 million, primarily to Asia and Europe. But this discovery reinforces Brazil's status as a key frontier for energy development, and it will be online. It takes typically 5 to 7 years to bring this online, depending on the appraisal and the investment coming into this. So whether or not BP has the deep pockets to go ahead and get this done, or is this just something that they're going to put in their back pocket and then look to be used as a selling tool for potential suitors or buyers, should that come up here in a little bit. So My opinion, I think they're going to put it in their bailiwick. With that, I'd like to take a shout out to Steve Reese and the gang over there at Reese Energy Consulting. Please go to reeseenergyconsulting.com and check out if you are in the midstream space and you need to move molecules, they are the people that can get you the most amount of money for your molecules. If you are in Poland or Germany and you want to get a tanker from the Haynesville, they're also the ones that can help you out there. So go to reeseenergyconsulting.com. Let's go to our last story for the day. California's wildfires emissions top its power plants, but go uncounted. A little bit of hypocrisy, if you can imagine that, Governor. The exclusion stems from a technicality known as the fast carbon cycle, which assumes forest will quickly reabsorb the released carbon. However, with the longer fire seasons and degraded ecosystems, this assumption is increasingly unreliable. Here's where I want to make a very important point. You sit back and take a look at how all the wildfires have happened in California. And I talked to a wildfire investigator, and he said out of the 7,000 that he had investigated, only 4 were started naturally. Yeah, you heard that. So now you sit back and take a look at how did the forest get so bad? It's because of the Sahara Club. It's because of all the NGOs that were filing lawsuits and not accounting for forestry and forest management. We would not be in this predicament. And then now all of the Palisades and the theft of the Palisades aid by potentially Governor Newsom's wife is now alleged as being on a inside scam. This is some big news, the alleged. I'm using the word alleged here. Governor Newsom has ramped up investments in forest thinning, prescribed burns, and firefighting. I doubt that these efforts come years after inaction and critics. I would question whether or not that has actually happened. Bad water management has also cropped up into this, has further fueled the crisis. So not only has Governor Newsom had bad water management, he's had bad forestry management, and he's had bad energy management. He is about to lose another 20% of the refining capacity is about to close in 2026. That is going to put gasoline and diesel prices starting at $8 to $10 a gallon. That is going to balloon through the entire economy because 60% of the U.S. gets products shipped into California and then they're put on trucks, and those trucks get charged the $10 gasoline. Anybody that's getting shipments put on trucks from California is going to pay for this. This is going to be a national security risk. So if it was just one section of the government that Governor Newsom was absolutely being miserable on, I'd say okay. But we've got, total devastation, bad management on topic after topic after topic after topic. So I've reached out to Steve Hilton and looking forward to getting him on the podcast because this is a national security issue. You've got refineries that have direct pipelines to our we have 36, I believe, military bases in California. Where are they going to get their diesel? Are they going to buy them from the increased capacity in China? That will be one to check to see if there's already contracts in place. That would be the one I would check. But don't have anything to say on that, but I would definitely want to see that. Anyway, you take a look. We've also got a chart in there on where from Nathan Hammer. Got to give Nathan Hammer a shout out. I used his graphic again. And you sit back and take a look at hypocrisy. The hypocrisy runs deep with Governor Newsom. With that, like, subscribe, share, reach out to Reese Energy Consulting. Go to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. Go to energynewsbeat.co. Let us know, and we want to hear from you. And if you are in California or you're in New York, we see you a lot of people from California and New York read our stuff. And if you need a tax break, reach out to us. Go to investinoil.com shop.energynewsbeat.co and check us out. Thanks. Have an absolutely fantastic day.